30 minutes would be
Okay,
awesome.
great.
Just because like I said, I'm working on another project that I'm trying to get out tomorrow. So yeah, if we can do that, that would
Yeah,
be amazing. And I'll make sure I
perfect.
am as succinct and deep as possible.
Great, no problem, no problem. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. So I guess my first question really was, if you'd be able to just describe your role at Facebook to everybody who's going to be watching this, and perhaps a little bit about how you got into that role and the story there.
Sure. So my role is both internally facing and externally facing. So externally facing, I try to interface with faith leaders, churches, pastors, denominations to help them really reimagine what Facebook is capable of, because so many people are using Facebook as just a marketing channel when in fact it has the capacity to be a ministry channel. And so I'm really trying to help people just rediscover what Facebook is capable of. And that's kind of the external role. Internally, I help to consult with our various product teams to try to bring a faith lens to what we're building relative to, how is this going to support communities of faith? How could this potentially, if we were to make some tweaks, how could it potentially have an even deeper impact? So yeah, I just try to be an advocate externally and internally at the same time. Now, how I got into the role, that's like a long story, but it really just is, the answer is God. Short story. I had never worked in tech or social media prior to this role, but I've been in ministry since I was 17, had been preaching, teaching the gospel, and I ended up marrying a pastor. He wasn't a pastor at the time, but he is now. And I had always worked in the corporate sector. I was in a high level role in the nonprofit sector, actually, right before this. And I thought I'd be doing that for the rest of my life. But the Lord spoke to me in April of 2017 that that assignment was over and told me to resign at the end of the fiscal year, which would have been June 30th of 2017. And 25 minutes after I resigned that day, I got the call from Facebook just out of the blue, asking if this is something I'd be interested in working with the company to help think about. And so, yeah, that's my very condensed
Wow.
journey and story. And I always tell people, because they say, "How do you get a job at Facebook?" I'm like, I don't know, fast, pray. I don't know. Because my experience is not the typical one, but yeah, that's me.
What is it like to get a phone call from Facebook? Because I think for
It's
most people that's like would blow their mind probably.
Yeah, it was a bit unbelievable. I mean, that was frankly my first reaction, because it's like, Facebook doesn't call people, so what is that? But no, it was truly a blessing, and it has been a blessing from the beginning. Very, very character building experience, because the company is constantly moving fast, iterating. One thing I've learned since I've been at Facebook that has really, frankly, served me in ministry is, if something isn't working, move on. A lot of
Mm,
times, we get so focused on making something work that isn't working, and so we invest time and energy and money when really we should have just pivoted a long time ago and done something different. And so I think I'm at the point now where I'm not really as married to things as I was before, where it's like, no,
mm.
we have to make this work. Not really. If it's not working, just figure out something that is and try something new.
That's really good. Um, so I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a bit about what your home church is like. I know that a lot of churches in America are probably quite different to how churches in the UK might be, and what we would be familiar with. So maybe you could just sort of
Sure.
describe what it looks like.
Well, I have a very interesting perspective, because I work with a lot of the largest churches and denominations. However, my local church, the church my husband and I lead, is not a large church. I mean, we have maybe a couple hundred people, which, frankly, is growth from where it started. When we became the senior leaders about 4 years ago, the church may have seen 40 people on a Sunday, maybe. And so we've experienced growth. But yeah, I work with a lot of the largest churches. And so the good thing about that is because I see both sides of the coin, I understand the challenges that leaders have when you're leading a small church, when you don't have staff, when you're dealing with volunteers and you're trying to cast vision, you're trying to get momentum, but you don't necessarily have people that it's their full-time job to execute on your vision. Like they
Mm,
have to kind of fit it into the cracks and crevices of their schedule. So I understand that, but I also see, of course, the very well-resourced churches and how they do have the capacity to be innovative and do things. But the truth is, churches don't start out that way. They have to have really good leaders who have very clear vision and who understand how to ruthlessly prioritize, which means when you're dealing with limited resources, you have to make investments in the things that are going to yield you the ability later to make more investments later. A lot of
mm,
times I've discovered that we as churches tend to invest in things that we've always done, regardless of whether or not they're actually yielding fruit. And what that means is we just end up in this kind of vicious cycle of always wishing we could do more while continuing to invest in what isn't working. So so my church is a smaller church, but we're growing. We have a very exciting vision. And so I'm just excited to see where this all ends up going.
awesome. That sounds really good. Um, so you've kind of mentioned a couple of times now about being okay with moving on from something sometimes, and if it's not working, there's no need to keep flogging a
Yeah.
dead horse, as the phrase is. So in your experience, how have you recognized when that is the time, when it is time to move on? Have there been any things that you've noticed, that's kind of familiar? I know the signs and therefore I know how to move on.
Yeah, I think, frankly, it starts with articulating what success looks like. So, in my mind, before I'm going to start anything, I want to be really clear, like what does success look like by what day or what date. And once I get to that date, I can then evaluate whether or not I am successful. And if I have not been successful, then I have two options. I can either which you should do this regardless, but I can think about why I haven't been successful and then take those learnings and try to make whatever it is successful. Or B, I can think about why I haven't been successful and apply that to an entirely new approach or a new project or whatever it is. So I think it really starts with, what is success to you? And, what is the timeline that you want to work on in order to evaluate whether or not you actually have those results. But it's definitely not just doing what we've always done because that's what we've always done. It's you have to think, well, what is success? And if success is what you have, then great. But if it's not, then you have to think about why is that, and you have to retool or repivot or do something different.
That's really good. Really good. I think a lot of people will find that very helpful. I know that that's been helpful. Coming back to your specific church, the
Sure.
place where you're there on Sundays and meeting with people midweek. How has your church used Facebook, particularly in reaching people with the gospel? The theme of this whole conference is all about how we share the gospel,
Yeah.
using what we have to preach the gospel, to share that message, to see people meeting Jesus. So have you got any examples of how your church has done that, and perhaps also
Mhm.
how you've involved volunteers in that? Because I think for
Mhm.
a lot of churches here, there'll be a few people represented, but we're all trying to work with volunteers to help us with what we're doing. What's been your experience?
Yeah, so we, as most organizations, we have a Facebook page. But one of the things I said at the Premier Digital Conference that I want to reiterate is if you think of your Facebook presence like a house, your page is it's your front porch. Like it's the place that people kind of walk up to and they see what you're about. But that's not the place where relationship happens. That's not the place where you actually build a sense of community. And so we use groups on Facebook. We have a Facebook group which we call our online, is really the place where we have conversations, where we're connecting with each other throughout the week, where people are praying for one another, where we're celebrating each other. Something my husband and I will do. We try to do it consistently, but I'm actually on a book tour right now, so it hasn't been able to happen as consistent as we want. Is we try to go live in the group just to talk about whatever the message was that either he taught on or I taught on that weekend before, just to provide a forum for people to ask questions, to go deeper. What I think tends to happen is church kind of becomes an event that we go to, as opposed to a conversation that we're engaged in. And I think faith really should be a conversation. It shouldn't just be a thing that we go watch.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're using Facebook, is we're really trying to have conversations, and just trying to deepen relationships. And I think Facebook is so uniquely positioned because, we have the tools in order to help people do that. But you have to first, it gets back to what I said earlier, you have to first define what success is. Like, is success just a certain number of likes on a post, or is success actually helping people transform their lives, deepen their faith? And if that's the case, then you have to take a different approach. We also use, in our group, we use a tool called learning units, which I love, because learning units actually allows you to create sequential learning in the group. And so it's very much so discipleship oriented. There's also a tool in groups called mentorship, which is exactly what it says, where you can actually pair people up to each other in order to grow together. And I think that's such a great tool, but many times people aren't using them because they don't know that they're there. So those are just some of the
Right.
things that we're doing.
Awesome. Really cool. And you mentioned about trying to go live in your Facebook groups when you can. Do you just do that from your phones, from your cell phones, or do you have to have any special kind of equipment, or is that something that we can just do whenever we can?
Such a great question. Yeah. My husband and I will just go live in our living room with my computer or my phone. Yeah, just very organic. And frankly, that's actually why live was created. I know a lot of times it's being used now, and there's like a production quality to it where you have like the nice cameras and the nice lighting, and that's fine, no problem with that. But live was created just to provide a vehicle for that kind of spontaneous conversation with people. And so,
Mm,
yeah, we'll just go live in our living room, or if we happen to be traveling together, we'll go live wherever we are, and just have a conversation. And we only do it for like 30 minutes, so it's not a long time. But those opportunities get the highest engagement, the highest excitement, the highest conversations.
that's cool. I was wondering if you've had maybe some examples from your own church, or maybe from churches that you've worked with, of people that have been in your groups, but perhaps not, they're not physically there on a Sunday or midweek. That could be, maybe some disabilities that are keeping them in the house, or they live in a completely different location. But have you had any examples of how people have found this to be really valuable for them?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, just in our own church online campus, like 40% of the members aren't even in our city. They're not, the majority of them aren't even in our state, you know?
Right.
And the reason for that is, churches, I get asked this all the time, like, how do you grow your online campus? Well, you grow it the same way that you grow your real life campus, which is people invite people. The beauty of an online campus, though, is there isn't the barrier of travel, or having to actually like put on clothes and get in a car and go somewhere. Now, you can invite your friends to join the community, and all they have to do is just accept. So it lowers the barrier. So yes, you will find that there are people who are going to either watch because they're incapacitated for some reason, or maybe they're out of town. We have a lot of people that tune in who have never been to our physical church, but they feel like they're a part of our community, and we love that.
Mm, that's really cool. Okay, so I thought I'd ask you for some. I've put one of my questions here. What are the top 3 ways that our churches can better use Facebook in order to
Mm.
reach more people, serve our communities better, and communicate our message? So I don't know whether you've maybe got some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I always recommend is you have, and this is difficult, you have to make the shift from thinking of social media as a marketing tool to thinking of it as a ministry tool. Because if you
Mm,
if you approach social media with the idea, oh, we're going to use this to get more people to the building, then you're basically going to just be posting about events and posting of, hey, come see us. And that's cool. But, the reality is the vast majority of the people are not coming to the building, but they're still in need of Jesus. And so,
Yeah.
I've coined the term digital discipleship, because I think that really is the mental model that we have to bring to social technology, which is, all right, this person may never show up to my building, but how can I help them mature in their faith? How can I pray for them? How can I challenge them to go deeper in God? So I think the first thing I would say is we have to make that philosophical shift in our mind, that this is not just a vehicle to get more people to come to our services. Frankly, this is a vehicle to get more people to come to Jesus. That's
Right.
the point. So that's number one. Number two, I strongly suggest and recommend to people that beyond just a content strategy, you think about a community strategy. And what that means is using content as a conduit for conversation, not just
Mm,
as an informational billboard to say, hey, look at this thing, or hey, look at this scripture, because then it's like people are just passively consuming content. And research has shown that when it comes to even well-being, people who passively consume content tend to have worse well-being than people who
mm,
are in healthy digital communities. So kind of shifted from a content strategy to community strategy. What that means is you want to help people discover and build meaningful relationships with each other. So, say and this really requires, I actually just did a teaching on this at a conference. This requires committing yourself to building relationships with and for people. So instead of just, how many comments did we get? How many likes did we get? You actually look to see who commented, and you respond to their comments with questions, not
mm,
just thanks for commenting. You actually respond with questions, and then you learn who these people are so that you can actually connect them with each other, tag other people in your responses and say, oh yeah,
mm.
Richard over there actually said the same thing the other week. Richard, what do you think about this? So it's building conversations. And I think, just those two things, those two shifts will radically change the level of engagement, I think, that you see on Facebook.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's so helpful. Yeah, and yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's a totally different way of approaching Facebook and why we use it. But absolutely, it's all about helping people meet Jesus at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Um, so perhaps you've already answered this, but I just thought I'd ask: is there maybe one thing that you see a lot of churches doing or using Facebook for that you think, if that could be improved or changed slightly, we'd all be doing much better?
Yeah, I think again, it gets back to, we have a very event centric approach to social. And so
Yeah.
we go live when there's an event, or we even will post when there's an event. I think we really have to get out of the idea that it's very time based, and broaden our horizon to understand there is no off hours for Facebook, right? It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
365 days a year. And so it gets back to your earlier question about how to leverage volunteers. There are people who very well may be willing to serve as online campus leaders, who would be willing to take a shift, on certain days of the week. Hey, you're going to have a couple hours that we're going to ask you to kind of keep your eye on the community, respond to questions, post as well, so that we can keep the conversation going beyond the weekend and beyond the service. I would also recommend, and this is something I've seen many times, I would recommend that pastors, lead pastors, senior pastors, get involved online.
Mm,
I've talked to so many
mm.
pastors who say, "Oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time." And I'm like, "Well, if you don't have time for people, which is essentially what Facebook is, then like, what are you doing?" that's that's why we're here. So I would recommend that they have a presence. And I don't think, but at least, as God speaks to you, you want to share it with the people. Like, hey, here's something that as I was in prayer this morning, the Lord spoke to me. Yeah, and just allow your life to be a ministry tool for people.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. So I just got a couple more questions really. One of them is what's your dream or your vision for your role at Facebook, but also, you know, as Facebook keeps growing and how churches in these faith-based organizations are using it, what do you see for the future?
Mm. My dream would be for every local church to have an online campus on Facebook as well, because many times people say, oh, well, should we do digital church or should we do real life church? It's not either or, it's both and. Like you need to be in both places, because right now there's almost 3 billion people on Facebook. And if you say,
Wow.
well, you know, we're not really interested in that, it's like, okay, so you're not interested in like half the world. I think that there needs to be a presence in both places, in all places. So my dream is for every local church to have an online campus on Facebook. And I think again, as we continue to grow and invest in communities of faith, I just want us to become the place where people can come and they know they're going to receive support, they're going to receive hope, that they can get plugged into a local church community that is thriving, where they can be inspired. And so, you know, we'll see what happens, but that's what's in my heart.
Brilliant. Yeah, amen. Believe it. So just, yeah, do you have perhaps just one piece of advice or just some encouragement for everybody who's going to be watching this? You know, at the end of today, when we all go home, we're going to be full of ideas, I'm sure, and wanting to put lots of things into practice. But just wondering if you've got sort of one thing you could say to sort of encourage us all, really.
Absolutely. I would say this. We tend to define church as a place people go. You know, it's a thing that we attend on a date, at a time, at a location. But in fact, the church was never meant to be a place. The church was always a body of people. When
Yeah,
Jesus talked about building his church, he didn't say, oh, I'm going to build it with bricks and stone. His church are all of the people who believe that Jesus is Lord. And what that means is
yeah,
we're not just the church when people come to our building, we are the church wherever we encounter people at any point on any day. And
yeah,
so my encouragement would be for people to have that mindset. You know, you are the church everywhere you go, including
yeah,
online. And so don't assume that that's just the place where we can advertise about the church, because if we only think that the church is the event, then we've actually missed what church is, and that is
yeah,
you, that is me, that's all of us. So that would be my encouragement, is just to remember
yeah.
who you are. You know, you are the church at all times.